All right, well, a new report showing a lack of oversight from the Biden administration when it came to placing unaccompanied migrant children with unvetted adults. Based on data provided by HHS's Office of Refugee Resettlement, from January 2021 to January 2025, the Senate Judiciary Committee found that almost 11,500 migrant children were placed with unvetted sponsors who were not their parent, not their legal guardian, were not fingerprinted, or did not receive a background check. And those 11,000 children weren't the only ones in potentially dangerous situations. The report goes on to say that during the same period, quote, the Biden-Harris administration did not conduct home studies for almost 80,000 migrant children under the age of 12, including 1,961 who were placed in households where a home study was recommended. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley called the findings appalling and saying this, quote, my oversight continues to expose disturbing evidence that the Biden-Harris administration turned a blind eye to tens of thousands of kids who needed proper supervision and care. Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Emily Compagno, and joining us today, Molly Line, Fox News correspondent, Molly Hemingway, Fox News contributor and editor-in-chief of The Federalist, Lisa Booth, Fox News political analyst, and Jeremy Hunt, former Army intelligence captain and Veterans on Duty chairman and attorney. All right, guys, lots to unpack here. It's a horrifying statistic to learn, Jeremy, and where do we go from here?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally unacceptable. You have 11,000 children who are with unvetted adults. There was one story where there was an address that had 42 kids at one address. And even Secretary Kennedy testified about this. He talked about how there was one individual kept coming back for more and more kids, like seemingly collecting these kids, and he would have different addresses every time. One of the addresses he used was to a strip club. Another address was to an empty lot with shipping containers there. I mean, so what was going on? And so I think, honestly, when you look at the story, this is more than just, oh, we made a mistake, or we should have, been a little bit more careful. No, this was reckless. Someone needs to be held accountable. Someone needs to go to jail for this. I mean, this is absolutely unacceptable. And now, of course, the legacy media won't talk about this, but ICE is actually doing rescue operations, rescuing a lot of these children who are with these unvetted adults. And so, but, we're not going to hear about that on other news networks, but that's a lot of work that's going in right now to get these children back to safety.
Well, this is absolutely horrifying. And the thing is, this is just the amount that are placed in those recklessly unvetted households. But this isn't even, these aren't even the statistics of what occurred there in the households registered to strip clubs with 45 other children in there. This is absolutely appalling.
Right. When President Biden opened up the border, and he did make a big show of it when he ran for office, he said he was going to open the border wide. People started coming immediately. It wasn't just about bringing in workers for low wages that also depressed the wages of legal Americans. It was about all this other stuff that happens, too. The crime that happens through human trafficking and drug trafficking is horrific. And people act like it's so loving to have an open border, even though we've seen just in some of the recent operations, you had the children working at a cannabis farm in California. You had the sex trafficking issue in Nebraska with certain illegal immigrant issues there, underage. These are real crimes with real victims. And so having an open border is not nice and friendly. It's actually a horrific humanitarian crisis as well.
So I want to get to Texas right now, Molly, because what we covered here, as we showed earlier and Garrett enlightened us on, these votes are coming into the second round, and then that will bring us maybe to the third round. Walk us through the implications here of this redistricting map potential.
Well, it's fascinating to see the eyes of the country looking at Texas. We think about gerrymandering. This is something that's been happening throughout U.S. history since the founding of the country, really. The word gerrymandering goes way back to Massachusetts, to an old Governor Eldridge Gerry. And this today is not unique to Texas. Gerrymandering, the redrawing of lines, happens very often. The challenge here, and what Democrats are pushing back against, is that they think that this is, one, inspired by Trump, which I think is potentially why they've been set off to the degree that they have, and the effort to go to stop it, where Democrats fled briefly. They couldn't really stop this, and that's why we're watching the process continue forward, but went around the country, essentially going to friendly governors from blue states, arguing that they can turn this into really a nationwide issue, and that blue states could try to counter this. So there's a lot going on nationally, making this far more than just something that affects Texas, the Texas voters, people that could be in these districts that may potentially be redrawn. The Democrats on the ground there in Texas are watching this in particular because they're arguing that they're going to lose seats, that ultimately this could result in Texas gaining up to 5 additional Republican House seats in the upcoming midterms. But this type of challenge goes on around the country, not just every 10 years. There are current challenges right now. The Brennan Center for Justice has been tracking this. There are a multitude of states that have lawsuits related to measures and redrawing. But this particular thing that's happening on the ground in Texas is fascinating. And we're just kind of midway through the ultimate process. The Republicans are likely to get their way here. That is the expected outcome of this, just merely because they do have the power on the ground there in Texas right now.
So, Lisa, Molly mentioned the courts and the lawsuits, and the Supreme Court has held that this is squarely within state courts to adjudicate. We know, obviously, there's some federal acts that apply, but the reality is that when you gerrymander based on partisanship, that is lawful. It's when it's done based on race or allegations of race, if proven, that makes it unconstitutional. Now, all of this is against the rubric that these Democrats, the reason the vote's today is because they weren't here earlier, right? And all of these guys fled to a blue-friendly state where a lot of Texans argued you are making a national spectacle at lawmakers that are now expressing their frustrations with this redistricting.
Yeah, absolutely. And to Molly's point, gerrymandering goes back to 1812 with Governor Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts because he created a district that looked like a salamander. In New York, in 2024, they redistricted. It was a court order, but they did a mid-decade redistricting. Part of this for Texas is because millions of people have migrated there since the 2020 census. That's in a large part, you've got Governor Gavin Newsom to blame because a lot of those people came from the state of California because of his poor leadership there. But also, I interviewed Hans von Spakovsky. He's a senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation. And he told me this, which I think a lot of people are missing in this overall conversation, that in early July, the U.S. Justice Department sent a letter to Texas warning them that 4 of the congressional districts they had put together in 2021 were unconstitutional racial gerrymandering. That stemmed from a decision at the end of last year under the prior administration from the Fifth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. So it was a court decision that sort of spurred the changes that needed to take place in the state of Texas. So I think that part of it has also been misrepresented by the media, which is not shocking.
And I think a big reason why you're seeing so much Democrat outrage over redistricting right now is because, just frankly, although both parties have done a lot of redistricting in various states, Democrats have done a much better job to maximize their votes. In Illinois, they have basically made it impossible to be elected as a Republican. In Massachusetts, there are no elected Republicans, even though close to 40% of the state voted for Donald Trump last year. So Democrats have kind of done as much as is possible to do with redistricting, whereas Republicans actually could do much more. So they're making this a big issue because they're freaking out about how many more seats could be obtained if other states did what Texas is doing as well, whereas they don't really have much room to operate to increase their congressional districts.
And Jeremy, that was exactly the argument by some Republicans when, for example, Governor Gavin Newsom joined in the fray and said, we're going to fight fire with fire. And Republicans were sort of like, you already have. That's the whole point. You've been cheating this entire time. And now we are doing it. GOP is doing it lawfully, not cheating. And the Democrats are having a meltdown.
Yeah, I mean, there's a right and a wrong way to do this. And as you mentioned, there are lawful ways to go about this. And a lot of times you actually have election law attorneys that go through and walk the legislature through the entire process to make sure it's all above board. So a lot of these cases that you see, oh, this is racial gerrymandering. I mean, of course, they're going to try that. The left is going to try that. But honestly, a lot of these attorneys are paying very close attention to the way these maps are drawn. They're making sure that the process that happens is done the right way. And that's, I've seen every indication from Texas that's the policy that they're following. I know back in Georgia, my home state, that's how we do things. And so hopefully we'll see a good result at the end of this.
And that's, oh, I'm sorry.
There's just another really interesting thing about the racial issue. That comes from civil rights laws decades ago. But the New York Times today reported just how many inroads have been made with various racial groups and the GOP. And so you're seeing that it'll be kind of interesting to see what happens here. White people used to be the only group that didn't vote, like one race, one party. But as the GOP does so much better with different racial groups, that will also make it harder for Democrats to fight redistricting based solely on racial grounds.
Well, that's the thing. So, Molly, so the critics in Texas were arguing, and I remember reading one of the stated protests. They said, you know, now there will be a district where conservative Hispanics and conservative white people will outweigh Democrat Hispanics. And the whole point was that's what we saw reflected in 2024. Like, that's an accurate portrayal of that demographics voting parties of that time. The whole point is it wasn't about race. And it seems to me that the Democrats are approaching this in a very stale, antiquated lens of assuming based on someone's skin color, they're going to vote a certain way and totally ignoring the variables and all of the varied votes, most of whom went to Trump there.
But I think the idea may be more of a legal strategy, though, where they're eyeing something that can be taken to court. That, you know, it has to fit a certain aspect of the law to fit and get to a courtroom, which may be the next goal in this particular case. That appears to be where this road is headed, since we know the ultimate outcome of the vote is likely to lean where Republicans want it to go. I spoke a moment ago about the Brennan Center for Justice. The big map they have tracks litigation all across the country related to redistricting. And right now, there are some 90 different cases. 28 states have been challenged. This is just as of July 25th, 2025. So this is a really big map. And the vast majority of the cases, 72 out of 90, seek changes to maps originally drawn under single-party control in the redistricting process. So as we see in given states around the country, if a certain party is in the majority, you may see a more likely that the drawing that happens in that 10-year period or wherever the period of redrawing happens may favor that particular party that happens to be in power at that point in time. And then a revolving cycle continues.
Well, it's also interesting because Democrats seem to be wanting to start a redistricting arms race that they're not going to be able to finish, right? Because even if you look at the state of California, because they have an independent commission with their redistricting, Governor Gavin Newsom has to call a special counsel this November. It could cost upwards of $200 million. Is that really something that California voters think is worthwhile? Also, Punchbowl News recently reported that Republicans could pick up at least a dozen seats in some of these red states. You look at Ohio, they have a state ordered, they have to redistrict ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. Well, guess what? Republicans control Ohio. And then also, if you look at a lot of these blue states, they either have independent commissions or bipartisan commissions, or they just don't have the votes to get it done. So this is an arms race that they seem to want, but they really shouldn't.
Well, and you're seeing that so much, too, with so many different aspects of election administration. Democrats loved mail-out balloting because they could capture all these votes from groups that were less likely to vote on Election Day. But this New York Times story I was referencing was about how all of those Democrat efforts to get out the vote using mail-out balloting aren't working so well as more and more minority and other groups are voting Republican. It is an arms race, and you have to play with the laws as they are given. And I just have to point out that Brennan Center, as the name suggests, is they're very interested in election administration, and they're usually interested in it in a pretty partisan way because they're a very left-wing group named after that left-wing lion of the Supreme Court, Brennan, Justice Brennan.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, well, really interesting, too, that the Democrats have a threefold issue. It's as Molly pointed out, the weakening of race as an indicator of the way that you vote. That was supposed to be their future. The Democrat Party was supposed to seal their future by always about race-based politics, identity politics. And now race is, as we've seen with President Trump, getting more black votes than any Republican in a very long time. You see that they're losing that. The second thing they're losing is these blue states are just so mismanaged that now we're seeing people are flooding to red states. So now it really benefits states like Texas when they're redrawing their maps. And then thirdly, I just love this, is that Republicans are finally getting smart to the way we should do these things and the process that goes about it. Democrats have been organized on this for so long. I mean, all over in New York, Illinois, they have whole, redistricting plans that start years in advance. Finally, we're seeing red states, Republican-led legislatures getting smart to this, learning how to do this on the right as well.
Well, and also, you just point out that it's ridiculous. So part of the argument from the left, they're saying that Republicans in Texas are doing this because it's coming from a point of weakness, because they're worried about the midterm elections. I'll just remind them that Republicans, President Trump just won the popular vote in 2024, and Republicans control both bodies of Congress. They're also heading in to the midterms with more money. The numbers aren't really there for the Democrats right now. And then beyond that, there's a sense of irony in all of this, considering the fact that these are the same people who tried to kick Trump off the ballot during the last election, tried to jail him, who weaponized government against him in unprecedented ways. So just a lot of points of hypocrisy and irony there.
For the final question and point, Molly, your take on the narrative as it shifts. So what I'm seeing in this administration is constant series of winning in the courts that are affirming that all of these policies and EOs are indeed constitutional. And when you add that into the layer that, for example, Molly mentioned, Massachusetts, 0 Republican representatives, even though 40% voted for Trump. Are what we've seen, is this the beginning of a sea change? Is this something that you think will all occur during this administration, where on the other side, we're all going to be spit out actually finally equitable of parties? Or do you think that it's going to take a few more years for the GOP to really secure an accurate representation?
I think what's happening now is this is a wake-up call, people all across America. This is sort of the sausage being made, the stuff that people don't pay a lot of attention to. And now you're seeing people like Gavin Newsom bringing this also on the other side of the aisle to the national front. So I think we may see a lot more attention paid to the gerrymandering and the redistricting that doesn't get the attention that perhaps it deserves, and really does affect people in their individual districts and who they have the opportunity to vote for, who would ultimately get elected. When it comes to Massachusetts, I think people feel like it's a lost cause as far as red contenders are. But that was disproven, 15 some years roughly, when Scott Brown won the surprise Senate upset, drove his brown pickup truck all across the state of Massachusetts and won this race. There are a lot of independents in Massachusetts that I think sometimes feel a bit overlooked. And yes, the Republicans make up the minority when it comes to the voters. But in Massachusetts, there is this, purple core that does exist and could be appealed to. And we may see that. Ooh, Lisa wants in. Go ahead, Lisa.
No, I was going to say 15 years ago. I feel old. I think it was 2010, right?
All right, guys. Well, as this develops all morning, we'll be taking you in and out, of course. Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Compagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.